Imagine standing in front of a locked door, your hand trembling on the handle, your heart echoing with the sound of every time you forgave what should have been unforgivable. Behind that door is a familiar voice, soft when it wants to be, sharp when it needs to pierce you just right. And every time you reach for the key to walk away, something in you whispers, but maybe this time will be different. That whisper is not love, it's captivity. There's a paradox you've been living inside. The very person who wounds your soul also becomes your false refuge from the storm they create. You fear losing them more than you fear losing yourself. But haven't you already begun to disappear? It starts subtly. Your laughter dulls, your dreams shrink, your boundaries blur. You begin to explain away their actions. They were tired. They didn't mean it. Maybe I pushed them. And before long, you're no longer fighting to be loved. You're fighting to be seen at all. How can someone who claims to care for you be the same one who leaves scars no one else can see? And why is it that even when you ache to run, you feel frozen, bound by invisible chains wrapped in the memory of better days? What is it about pain that begins to feel like home? The great contradiction. We often cling to the very things that break us because breaking feels familiar. And somewhere along the way, trauma starts wearing the mask of love. You call it loyalty, you call it commitment, but deep down, your soul is whispering the truth. This is not what you were made for. So ask yourself, if love is supposed to heal, why are you bleeding? And if the person who's hurting you refuses to change, what will it cost you to keep waiting? This isn't just about heartbreak. It's about identity erosion, emotional disfigurement, the slow death of self-worth under the guise of staying strong. And there comes a moment, a sacred, terrifying moment, when you have to ask, what if the only way to find peace is to let go of the person you once thought would save you? But letting go is not easy when you've built your worth around being needed, around trying to fix what you didn't break, around believing your silence is noble and your suffering is proof of love. It's not. It's time to ask the question that your heart already knows the answer to. How do you break free from someone who keeps wounding your soul? When a part of you still believes you can't live without them, let's go deeper. Not just into the pain, but into the unseen force behind it. The psychology, the conditioning, the invisible roots. Because before you can ever walk away, you have to understand why you stayed. And that's where the truth begins to burn. You didn't stay because you're weak. You stayed because you were taught that love endures, that forgiveness is divine, that loyalty means weathering storms, even if the storm has your name written in its lightning. But beneath that noble-sounding surface lies something darker, older, and more difficult to confront. A hidden psychological and philosophical machinery forged long before you met the person who now wounds you. The truth is this: many of us are conditioned from childhood to normalize pain when it comes, cloaked in the language of love. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's the core of it. This isn't just a toxic relationship. This is an old, unconscious contract you didn't realize you signed. A blueprint, drawn by early experiences, by the way affection was offered or withheld, how safety was created or destroyed, and how your worth was mirrored back to you by the people who shaped your earliest worldview. If love once meant walking on eggshells, you may now equate instability with connection. If being seen required being silent, you might confuse suppression with strength. And if pain was ever laced with moments of affection, then you've been taught to wait for crumbs, mistaking them for a feast. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when your why is survival at the cost of your soul? You begin to tolerate patterns that betray your value. You justify mistreatment in the name of devotion. You think if you just love harder, give more, bend further, then maybe, just maybe, they'll finally love you the way you need. But here lies the hidden trap. No one can love you correctly if their presence constantly teaches you to abandon yourself. This isn't just psychology, it's philosophy. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, that we are responsible for giving meaning to our own lives. Yet too often, we outsource that meaning to another person, binding our existence to their approval, their presence, their validation. You become a prisoner of their inconsistency, hoping that if you stay good enough, quiet enough, loving enough, they'll stop hurting you. But love, when it is real, does not require the disintegration of your being. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote of the will to life, that insatiable, unconscious drive that compels us to suffer for the continuation of connection, even when it's toxic. He viewed human desire as a source of suffering, a cycle we must understand if we hope to escape. And so here you are, driven by an old survival instinct to stay attached, even as you bleed emotionally from the wounds inflicted by that very attachment. Now pause. Consider how many times you've confused fear of abandonment with love, or trauma bonding with passion, or your ability to endure with your capacity to heal. But endurance without truth is just slow spiritual suicide. You've been taught to admire resilience, but what if resilience is just your heart's way of surviving a war you were never meant to fight? What if the real strength isn't in staying, but in finally seeing the pattern and saying, no more? There is a reason you have tolerated the intolerable. It's not stupidity and it's not lack of courage. It's programming. Cultural, familial, religious, emotional programming woven deep into the subconscious. The belief that your suffering will be rewarded, that if you just hold on long enough, the pain will turn into peace. But here's the brutal truth. Some people will never become what you hoped they would, and your waiting will not transform them. It will only deform you. Let that sink in. So if you've ever wondered why you feel stuck in a cycle of emotional pain, this is why. The roots are older than the relationship. The wound is ancestral, psychological, and deeply human. But now you see it, and what we can see, we can change. You're not crazy for wanting love. You're not broken for being hurt. You're not weak for having stayed. But now you're being invited into a deeper realization, one that will demand not more love for them, but radical love for yourself. Because to truly walk away, you must understand the internal force that kept you circling the same wound, mistaking it for a home. Now the question becomes, what has this unconscious loyalty cost you? And what happens to your soul when it stays bound to a wound it was never meant to carry? Let's explore that next. You told yourself it wasn't that bad. You downplayed the sighs, the insults wrapped in humor, the long silences that stung more than words ever could. But something strange began to happen. Not all at once, like a house doesn't collapse from a single gust, but from the slow erosion of its foundation. The unseen consequences of staying tethered to someone who wounds you are the most dangerous because they don't scream. They whisper. You don't wake up one day with a shattered sense of self. You chip away at it slowly. Every time you say it's okay when it's not. Every time you excuse behavior that would make your younger self weep. Every time you wait for an apology that never comes and convince yourself you're overreacting. These are the soul-deep damages, the erosion of self-worth, identity distortion, and spiritual numbness. Neurologically, your brain begins to rewire itself. Cognitive dissonance, a term in psychology for the mental discomfort you feel when your actions don't align with your values, becomes a way of life. You tell yourself they love you, but they harm you. So your mind splits itself in two to survive. You build elaborate stories to make sense of the madness. You say, they're just hurt, or no one's perfect, or they didn't mean it. But in doing so, you unconsciously declare to your own soul, I don't deserve better. And then identity confusion seeps in. You forget who you were before you met them. The joy, the dreams, the clarity, it all fades behind a fog of emotional hypervigilance. You start living in reaction, not creation. You watch your words, gauge their mood, try to predict the next emotional landmine, and slowly, your inner compass, the one that guided you toward truth, starts spinning in every direction but home. Philosophically, this becomes a kind of existential death. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. But what happens when the version of you that changes is a dimmer, quieter, hollower echo of your real self, you lose your voice. Not just in arguments, but in your own story. You silence your intuition. You suppress your needs. You edit yourself down to what is palatable to them. And perhaps worst of all, you begin to mistake this suppression for maturity, as if enduring pain with poise is a badge of honor. But there's no honor in slowly disappearing. Let's also speak of cultural conditioning, the myths that bind us. The idea that love conquers all, that relationships are hard, that nobody's perfect. These cliches become prisons, offering just enough logic to keep you trapped. They teach you to doubt your breaking point, to question your pain, to feel guilty for drawing boundaries. You internalize the idea that choosing yourself is selfish, that leaving is failure, that healing is betrayal. And so you stay, not because you're still in love, but because you fear what leaving might reveal. How much of yourself you've lost. Here's the paradox. You begin to feel guilty for your own healing. You start to worry that breaking free might hurt them, even though they've been the one hurting you all along. This too is a consequence. Your empathy weaponized against you. Your softness turned into submission. And if there are children involved, or friends, or shared history, the entanglement deepens. You tell yourself it's too late, that you've invested too much, that leaving now would make all that pain meaningless. But hear this, the pain becomes meaningful only when it becomes a catalyst for your liberation. Otherwise, it just calcifies into regret. The consequences extend beyond emotion. Your body keeps score, sleepless nights, anxiety, a stomach that clenches when they enter the room. These are not random symptoms, they're alarm bells. Your nervous system has learned to live in fight or flight. And no one, no matter how strong, can survive in constant defense without consequences. Your spirit starts to numb. You stop crying because even tears begin to feel pointless. You stop praying, hoping, dreaming, because all your energy is spent surviving. This is the true cost of staying too long. Not just the scars they leave, but the self you bury in the process. But now you're waking up, and awakening is painful, yes, but it's also powerful. Because what is seen cannot be unseen, and what is named cannot be ignored. So now you face the burning question, what are you willing to risk for your own resurrection? Because letting go will cost you, but staying might cost you everything. They told you leaving was weakness. They said endurance made you holy. They called silence peace and pain growth. But what if rebellion is the purest form of healing? You've been conditioned to believe that love is proven through suffering, that forgiveness means re-entry, that turning the other cheek means offering both your heart and your sanity. But what if love, real love, sometimes looks like distance? What if the most radical thing you can do is walk away? Let's break something open right now. You don't need permission to protect your soul. That ache in your chest when their name lights up your phone, that is your nervous system screaming for liberation. That pit in your stomach when you see their face or hear their voice. That's not drama, that's data. So how do you begin to break free? Not just physically, but spiritually, psychologically, cellularly. It begins with a shift in allegiance. You must stop betraying yourself in the name of someone else's comfort. You stop asking, what will they think if I leave? And start asking, what will happen to my soul if I stay? The rebellion begins in the mind. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so take a scalpel to your stories. Which ones are yours? And which ones were implanted? Who taught you that pain is the price of love? Who convinced you that your voice was dangerous? Who praised your silence and called it strength? Trace the roots. Burn the dead wood. Here's the truth. Loyalty is not a virtue when it costs you your aliveness. You owe no loyalty to dysfunction. You owe no devotion to those who exploit your empathy. You don't have to bleed to prove you're good. And you don't have to explain your healing to anyone who benefited from your silence. Now, practically, what does rebellion look like? It's not always dramatic. It's not always slamming doors or epic speeches. Sometimes rebellion is quiet, steady, and terrifyingly bold. Sometimes it's a blocked number, a boundary held, a room you don't re-enter, a reply you never send, a birthday you no longer acknowledge. It's the sacred pause between reaction and response. You don't owe closure to someone who tore you open. You don't owe access to someone who abused your vulnerability. Even Jesus walked away from crowds. Even the divine took time in the wilderness. But rebellion isn't just about separation, it's about reclamation. Reclaim your rituals, your mornings, your mirror, your meals. Make the mundane sacred again. Play music while brushing your teeth. Light candles while you journal. Bless the silence. Speak to God aloud. This is how you re-inhabit the life that was slowly stolen. Rebellion is also in rewriting your language. Stop saying, "I'm too sensitive." Start saying, "My sensitivity is sacred." Stop saying, "Maybe it was my fault." Start saying, "It's not my job to carry their brokenness." Your inner voice becomes your inner compass. Speak to yourself like someone you're learning to love. Let your self-talk become a safe house, not a war zone. And community? Essential. You don't need a stadium of fans. You need one soul who sees you and refuses to let you shrink. Find people who mirror your light, not your wounds. People who make your nervous system sigh in relief, not bristle in panic. Rebellion also means embracing grief, because even toxic love is love in a twisted way. And letting go is loss. Mourn it. Mourn the idea of who they could have been. Mourn the version of you who waited, prayed, begged, tried. Mourn the moments that almost felt like hope. Then build an altar from the ashes. Light a candle not for them, but for the girl you used to be, who stayed longer than she should have and still hoped. This is where the shift happens. When you realize that freedom isn't found in them changing, it's in you no longer needing them to. Because your peace is not a reward for their repentance, it's a decision. A line drawn in the sand of your spirit. This rebellion will not be linear. You will have moments of weakness. You may check their profile. You may dream about them. You may want to go back. But hear this. Relapse is not failure. It's a flare of your past trying to test your future. You're still free. Even in your longing, especially in your longing. Every time you choose yourself, your health, your joy, your quiet, you are burning another link in the chain. And that's what this is about. Not just escape, but resurrection. This is how empires of abuse fall. Not with fury, but with a woman who decides, no more. There's a silence deeper than loneliness. It's the silence that remains when the shouting stops, when the cycle ends, and you're finally left alone with yourself. And in that moment, the question arises, not, why did they hurt me, but why did I stay? The final realization is not about them. It never was. It's not about their cruelty, their manipulation, their failure to change. It's about your awakening. Your soul has always been whispering, even when you were too afraid to listen. And now it's shouting. Here's the truth you've been circling. You were never powerless. You were conditioned. You were taught to endure instead of exit, to justify instead of judge, to shrink instead of shout. And for a long time you confused survival with loyalty. But the soul knows. It remembers Eden. It remembers freedom. And it refuses to let you die in a house that no longer feels like home. This is not just a personal story. This is the human condition. We are born into patterns, familial, societal, spiritual, that convince us our worth is transactional. Be small to be loved. Be silent to be safe. Be pleasing to be chosen. But here's your final, brutal, beautiful revelation. You are already chosen. Not by them, not by your trauma, but by something older, deeper, eternal. Call it God, call it grace. Call it the roaring echo of the divine within you. It's the same force that split seas and raised the dead. It lives in you now. You don't need them to free you. You are the Exodus. Let that sink in. You are not waiting to be released. You are the one holding the key. And the door has always been unlocked. The love you begged them for, it wasn't theirs to give, because it wasn't shaped for your becoming. It was a counterfeit, a performance of affection that kept you addicted to potential. But potential is not reality, and hope can become a form of bondage when it's rooted in fantasy. Here is your final liberation. You do not need their closure to create your peace. You do not need their apology to begin again. You do not need their validation to declare, I matter, because you do. By existing, by breathing, by reclaiming your space in the world and refusing to apologize for taking up room. Let's go even deeper. There's a reason your pain felt sacred. It was. Pain is the birthplace of wisdom. Suffering, when faced, is not weakness. It's alchemy. The wound they gave you, it tore something open, and from that tear light pours in. That's the paradox. The very thing that almost broke you is now the place where your power enters. The woman who walks away doesn't walk empty. She walks with fire. The man who chooses freedom over familiarity becomes dangerous, not to others, but to the lies he once believed. You were never meant to live a half-life, begging for scraps of love at a table you were called to own. This final truth doesn't erase the pain. It transforms it, because now you are the author. You are not defined by the chapter they dominated. You are not confined by the trauma they triggered. You get to write what comes next. Let it be bold. Let it be holy. Let it be yours. Speak it aloud. I am allowed to begin again. I'm not bound by who hurt me. I carry the power to rebuild, stronger, softer, wiser. And here's where you rise. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Not with revenge, but with rebirth. Not with shame, but with sovereignty. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without being owned. It means waking up and not feeling afraid. It means loving yourself more than the ghost of who you were with them. You are not just free. You are new. Let that be the final word. Let it echo through your days and anchor your nights. I'm not theirs, I'm mine,